Pintastic New England, howdy! Woo! Okay, so I got a lot of stuff, and I tend to ramble, and rambling, some of my ramblings are marginally interesting, but I want to get going on the show I prepared here. That's a dialed in sound when you go through the theater when there's something there and then you get like 50,000 points. You never forget your first orgasm. So that's what that sound was trying to do. And that's the theme for this show, because I wanted to kind of filter my experience through my first times, either the first time I did something or the first time that I did something that had never been done before. So this is one of them. I work at my house where I have a home studio, but this home studio is in a nice 400 square foot space underneath my garage, down those 18 concrete steps. So since I rebooted my career in 2006, all the machines, all 20 machines that I've worked on have never come down into my studio. I keep them up in the garage above, which is an unheated garage. This is not an ideal situation. I get some code back from my thing, I put it on a USB stick, I run upstairs, it's 50 degrees, I can see my breath, and then I test the game, but I don't do that as much as I should because, well, it's up those stairs and it's 50 degrees. So, we did a lot of work on Dialed In to redo the back box and make better speakers, and it's a Pat Lawler game, and I said, you know, the way I always used to work when I had a studio on the ground floor is the machine needs to be next to me for a lot of reasons, and it makes it better and faster and gooder. So, those are heroes. I tapped the community, a good friend of mine, and the other guy on the right side is the guy that does the announcements for the Tacoma show, Byron. These guys came over and we brought that machine down those 18 concrete steps into my studio. We learned two things. One, yes, it was a great idea. Dialed In is a much better project for my having done it. Two, these guys told me, don't ever do this again. So I'm going to continue to do it, but I'm remodeling my studio and I'm buying one of those industrial lifts that they move like site construction stuff on. I'm going to bring the games in the garage. I'm going to put them on my Harbor Freight thing. I'm going to like put it on this thing. I'm going to hand crank them down. Then I have my other Harbor Freight thing that'll roll them into my studio. And this 67-year-old guy is going to be able to move these games around. And from now on, all games that come out of my studio will have the benefit of being down in there. That's a first time. But this is the first time I ever wrote a song about a cell phone. Okay, so that's a hook, and you know, this is a license-free product, and so we have to grab you in any way we possibly can. So this is kind of a, you know, McDonald's jingle, okay? And I hope that I've now firmly implanted this earworm and that you will be compelled to satisfy your need to hear this by buying one of these. So, okay. So in Dialed In, you have, I've got a new, that's what you first get, and it does the job by, you know, making the cell phone more tangible, giving you a little energy. But as soon as you've played a mode, you are now in the exalted state of you are ready to lock a ball lock enabled. So we have a different piece of music for that that tells you, oh. And once you've done that, you've locked a ball, then you're in multi-ball ready. That's yet another more energetic tensor piece of music that says, get the ball to the phone scoop, start your multi-ball. You can sing. Please.
Over to the left, it said burning sensation.
That's burning. Okay, so what we're looking at is our my stuff I captured from my workstation, and the particular notes you're seeing are the melody, and they're being played by an instrument, and in that particular synthesizer, that instrument is called burning sensation. See? You didn't know there were lyrics for that, but now you'll never be able to forget that. And you'll be playing the game, and you'll get into that selfie mode, and you'll be going, crazy Bob, woo, selfie time. Cool. Okay, all this started in 1981 for me. Prior to that time, I'd been a professional musician who, like a gypsy with a union card, traveled around the United States playing music in rock bands and lounge bands and show bands. But I needed a day job, and I was in an insurance company for 2 years, and then some headhunter found out that I was like this Apple II hobbyist. And Gottlieb, the pinball company, had decided to create a video game division. Actually, that's not true. Columbia Pictures, who owned Gottlieb by that time, told them, have a video game division because we're having a hard time selling pinball machines in 1980. So I was a software engineer, and when it came time for the first game to be, nearly done, they needed, gosh, we need music, we need sound for this thing, and I just like. So a career that I could not have imagined, and I have a decent imagination, sort of came to be because I'd been a musician, then I became a computer programmer, and I taught PL1 at an insurance company, and then I put these two things together. Grab your ankles. Okay, stop that. Now the interesting thing to notice there, because I started in video games, but pinball always loomed large in my career. So what about this is pinball? Tell me. Come on. See those little things up there? Oh! Drop targets! I had no idea that I would end up doing this, but that's where I started. And we're in the context of a pinball company. I've been a musician since I was a sophomore in high school, getting paid to entertain people and do stuff. And in the bands that I was in, we recorded original songs, and we tried to make it, and we never reached critical mass. 1 year into my career doing this, Parker Brothers had bought the rights from Gottlieb to make home game console versions of our coin-op games, and so they made an Atari 2600 version of Reactor. And that first Christmas,
there's a sensation in playing the Reactor video game that people really get into.
Good luck. Your turn. Me?
Reactor from Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
My music's on TV. And you can imagine, I've been trying to do this for more than 10 years, staying in bad hotels, traveling, doing everything I could, and 10 months at this video game company, and my music's on TV. So that was a first for me. Here's another first. When you write stuff for video games or pinball machines, you frequently need to have a heroic theme because somebody has done a good thing and you want to make them feel good. And writing heroic music is an interesting thing to do. You have to figure out how to do that. I mean, I'm a lounge band guy, right? What do I know from heroism? So this is the first attempt at that.
Gottlieb's second game was first called Video Man, but because it was too close to Superman became Protector. That was too wimpy, so it became Guardian. And then after a focus group, it became Argus. While Argus was never produced, it did start my quest to figure out how to write heroic music.
You've done a good thing. And that was the other first, sadly. It was the first thing that I spent 8 months of my life on, and they didn't make it, you know. Sir. I only have an hour, but I'll elaborate on this. The question was, yes, did I do Crawl? And I did like 5 or 6 games for Gottlieb, did the sounds for, and Crawl was my first license. Crawl was a science fiction film from Columbia Pictures, who owned Gottlieb, and they handed us this thing, and you know, we want a video game to be ready to be in theater lobbies when we have Crawl. And be careful what you ask for, because Crawl was not well received. And the video game is actually kind of better than the movie was, but the intense association with this thing is it's going down, you know. Crawl didn't do all that well. But yes, Reactor, and there's some other game that I did. My first hit game, finally, after, we did Reactor, which was not a hit, but they made it at least. Then we did that other thing with the 4 names, and that didn't get made. But the third one, third time's a charm. And this is really the first time that I used this technique, sort of the jingle technique, which I've used liberally and dialed in. So I wrote a lyric for that tune, but it's not actually for Q*bert.
Q*bert's Pyramid Completion tune had been written years before by me as a jingle and submitted to a local car dealership. You get a lot of great car when you buy one from us for the best deal on a new or used car. They didn't buy it, so it ended up in Q*bert.
And you notice some of these clips are pre-recorded because at 7:18 Pacific Standard Time, I don't sing. I don't sing real well anyhow, but you don't want to be subjected to that. Then I have another first. It's the first time, keep in mind that work for hire thing, you know, the company owns it. Something happened to my work and I had absolutely no idea. Somebody made a pinball machine out of Q*bert. And what I didn't realize at the time, or even till 20 years later when I happened to go to the Pinball Museum out in Las Vegas, where they have a Q*bert Quest, and I played it, and I'm like, oh my God, these are all my sounds. The great Craig Byrewaltis, who was the pinball audio guy, working on the same hardware as I was for video, you know, Haunted House and all these great games. I gave him my code, and I didn't know what they were going to do with it. And he basically just kind of rearranged the deck chairs. And so I did a John Trudeau game. I had no idea, but that's really my first pinball credit, and I wasn't there. So I saw the tip of the Titanic starting to go down, and so I left Gottlieb. And about 8 months later, let's see, it was Coca-Cola at that time owned it, pulled the plug, and it became Premiere, and then the video game thing just went away, and Sony ended up owning the assets, and then 20 years later, there are Q*bert in major films and all this stuff, and I didn't even get a t-shirt. So, I went, like a lot of our coin-op brethren in 1983, I left to a company in South Barrington called Action Graphics. And it was a cool company. I got to be an aesthetic engineer. Cool, huh? Yeah, management's going, what the hell? You want what on your card? Yeah, just let me do it. I'll work hard. And this is a first for me because I met a lot of really good people. The one thing this guy had was the ability to hire good people. He couldn't run a company, but he really hired good people. And I met these people at the first time. The only reason I'm bothering to tell a pinball audience this is in this company where we did conversions, ports of like 2,600 games. Pitfall, we converted to the Commodore 64 and the ColecoVision, that kind of stuff. So we were a pure video game. Then we did original product, and we did pretty good stuff, but the company was so poorly run that after 2 years it went away. But I met some people. Now, nobody knows who Richard Ditton is, hardly anybody. Dave knows who Richard Ditton is.
Dave knows everybody.
Richard and his wife and I, when this company went away, formed a company. You know, we're owed 4 months of salary at that point. We have no seed capital, but we're associated with a very successful Commodore 64 game called Winter Games, and the publisher wants to port that to everything. So they paid us to do that, and on the wings of that, we formed a company that eventually became Incredible Technologies. But Richard was a rocket scientist, literally. His first gig out of school was to be down at Cape Canaveral, where he wrote launch software for the shuttle. And after they got the first shuttle up, he was satisfied and he quit and he came back to Chicago and he went into video games. So I met Richard, and he really had a, well, I wanted to say had a heart on, but he really wanted to do a pinball operating system. That's what he wanted to do. So the opportunity came to us because Gary Stern wanted to do with Williams what his father had done to ballet. Don't go there.
You're baiting.
I know. But basically, he wanted to start a pinball company, and if you want to get operators and distributors to accept your new company, if they already have parts in their warehouse that they can use as replacements and stuff, so he teamed up with Data East, a Japanese video game company, and they knocked off the System 11 board, and that's legal, right? Williams would have nailed him to the wall had it not been legal. You can do that. But you have this problem, this copyrighted bit of intense software that actually runs that hardware. Well, that you had better create. Richard created that. We got hired and we did all the software, the light shows, all this stuff for the first 9, 10 Data East games. And they didn't care about the soundboard, so I got to, I'm not a double E, but I got to spec the soundboard, and I made it a stereo soundboard, so that's another first. Richard wrote this operating system, which I'll bet there are little bits and fragments which still exist in Stern games today. You know, nobody throws away something that works. So Richard's really important in terms of pinball. Then there's this guy.
Lonnie Ropp from Screamin' Holler, Kentucky.
So Lonnie worked at Action Graphics. And, you know, show of hands, anybody know who Lonnie is? A few people, right? Well, Lonnie has touched probably more solid-state pinball projects than any programmer alive. I'll make that statement. He's been the lead on at least 20 or 25 of them. He's been there doing other stuff on them. He managed them. He's done programming on. In the first decade, in the 80s, he did those 5. And then in the 90s, he did those 18. And then in the next decade, he did 19 more. And we're only at 2016, and his last one was Aerosmith. And so that's like 59 games that he's touched. So he's kind of important in pinball, right? And then this guy worked at Action Graphics. Who knows who this guy is? Pat. Who said that? Okay. Now I promised it.
T-shirt?
Yeah, you get a T-shirt, and I'll explain.
You should have started with that.
I'll explain the significance of the T-shirt later. I didn't bring the gun. I really wanted to pelt you guys with T-shirts, but I couldn't bring it on the airplane. And Pat's a good guy to know. you know, in terms of pinball. And all these guys worked at this goofy little company for 2 years in South Barrington. It was, what a strange place to become, you know, pinball, but it kept calling me and I didn't realize it. So, as part of this deal with Gary Stern, I got to create a soundboard, I got to create a synthesizer controller and all the software that's involved, and then I wrote my first pinball audio package for Laser War. It was a Yamaha 2151 and did 8 voices of FM and had 3 good stereo amps, 3 amps, which allowed us to do stereo and a bottom thing, and that was novel. Williams had 2 amps, and they took the stereo signal and merged it in just mono, you know. So this was an improvement, and it really sounded good.
Welcome, Gloria. Welcome. Energizing.
So that's, and then this is my first big jackpot. And Laser War is a game virtually without modes. All you're doing is you're doing the yellow stuff and the blue stuff and the red stuff and working your way up to enabling the big jackpot. And that's really the whole game. But doing that is a lot of fun. So when you get to that big jackpot, we have the ion cannon. And I think it compares favorably to the wind-up for the multi-ball in, I think it's Adam's Family. I tried, you know, this is my first, and you know, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you can do, and you don't know what you shouldn't do. But the client was real demanding, and I mean, this is like the 4th iteration of this. The designer, you know, here's the jackpot, you know, oh no, it needs to be bigger. We're competing with Williams, it needs to be bigger. You know, so this one, you have to be careful because you're very likely to drain well before this is over. Yeah, the guys in the background is like screaming because it's, you know, he's been hit by laser blasts. It's very cool. This is my first lyric that actually was ever exposed to a pinball audience, and we started a tradition with this game of creating a karaoke event at Game Over. This is really one of the first singing pinballs.
That's what it said on the flyer, the first singing pinball.
Yeah. Black Knight 2000 notwithstanding, we had recorded, wrote these little jingles because the whole metaphor for Time Machine was kind of like a radio station. So we created these radio station stingers. And, you know, return to the 50s, and we sent these down to Texas where those things get done, and they came back in glorious 3-part harmony and stuff. Then we jammed them into a horrible compression thing, and so we had about 6 or 7 of these, and it was very cool.
That's Jack in the front. I know that guy.
Kevin O'Connor, sorry. Okay, so now it's like 1989, and we do about 9 or 10 games for Data East, but they were frankly a somewhat demanding and annoying client, and it wasn't really worth what we were spending to give these packages to them, so we quit, and then they hired Lonnie from us, and then Lonnie's been there ever since. He still works there. And so I stopped doing pinball at that point. And then in '93, I got a job offer, very strange, to join the new research division at Microsoft. So they located me where I am now. So, Okay, I missed a golden age of pinball. Now, for me, this is important, that article, a golden age, because I think we're potentially working our way into a new golden age of pinball. But clearly, this was a golden age between, what, Space Shuttle through to when Williams Shuts the Door was clearly some of the best machines ever made. I wasn't paying attention. I was busy trying to be a researcher. This is another first for this talk. I'm going to show you something of what I was doing, why Microsoft flew me 1,700 miles and relocated me and did all this stuff. I was in the Advanced User Interface group. We were doing research on how to make computers better for you, right? And keep in mind, this is 93, and think about the kind of things computers were doing at that time. And what they were working on when I got there was what they called, ready? The personified user interface. And what all that means is there's like you interact with a character instead of a command line or exploring the interface with a mouse. You literally deal with some entity. And research at Stanford, these are the guys you have to blame for the paperclip and Bob and all that. They were the ones who said, they had tested people, and people had a better computing experience. They wanted to have a pal in the computer. They really did. But what we could do to make a pal and what they wanted, well, there's a certain distance between that. But they hired me because they didn't know how to make interactive sound, and you couldn't hire anybody from a university with a PhD to make interactive sound, so they hired me. The task for this particular research prototype was building a playlist of music that you want to listen to. And this particular thing was more like a marketing demo that was done at CES in 1995. And so this is a first. Nobody has seen this in a long time.
But it does illustrate some of the progress we're making towards more advanced versions of the social interface.
Super. Who's that guy?
Hey, PD. PD?
What?
Let's do a demo.
Oh, showtime already. I'm taking requests.
What have you been listening to?
Wayne Newton. Everybody loves Wayne Newton.
No thanks. How about playing something classical?
Oh, okay. Oh, Siegfried.
Now, the important thing to know about this is that Microsoft flew me 1,700 miles and made me a researcher and stuff so that I could be a parrot. That's me. I'm Petey. Because it suited the nature of the work, right? They had this application which encompassed a database of 100 CDs, and we knew stuff about the artist and played bass and all this stuff. And so you needed a pretty big vocabulary, and it kept changing. So hiring some professional talent to do this, we'd be in and out of the studio all the time. It would be too cumbersome. So I finally said, I can do a parrot. So, yeah. My entire career to this point, I'm now 33, and I'm a parrot. Cool. But they paid me well to be a parrot. So I worked there until 2000, and I took off some time and did woodworking and enjoyed myself. But Chris Granner retired from doing sound work for Stern at that time. He did the first SAM game. It was a World Poker Tour. It was a Steve Ritchie game, so I understand why he retired. Just kidding, Steve. Just kidding. But there was an opening, right? And again, it's who you know. So theoretically, the next game up was going to be a Pat Lawler game. And Lonnie still works there, and I know Lonnie and Pat from Action Graphics. And I had sent a piece of email out to Lonnie saying, I am looking to get back into this. So I got the call, right? So I went to Chicago, just for 3 days. And I don't have any more T-shirts, but I encourage enthusiastic participation. What game is that?
Pirates of the Caribbean.
That's right, Pirates of the Caribbean. For the lovely and charming Dennis Nordman, who I met for the first time doing this. Then I met this guy for the first time.
There. All right, David. You wanted to know where the left orbit was. This is the left orbit. Here's the here's the flippers, right? Here's the left orbit, and the left orbit goes up like this underneath this underneath the exit of this back here. It goes like this, and then into the top popper here. This popper pops up and gives you to this upper playfield over here on the right.
And that's the hands and voice of the charming Dwight Sullivan. And frankly, that's not the way we work. But that was my first game in 17 years. And games had gotten a little more complicated than Laser War. And even by today's standards, Pirates is a whacked playfield. I mean, there's a lot of strange stuff going on there. So Dwight gracefully made me a video, which I can now flog years later. Now, what's changed in the 17 years while I was off being a parrot? Relative to the work I do, the single most important thing that changed is there's more memory. See, back in the old days, transistors were big, children. They were very big, and you didn't get many of them because they were so big and required so much expensive silicon. And that means memory is made out of transistors. So all that qubit and reactor stuff was done with 4K of memory. There are children's toys that have more than that now. Then the work that was done at Data East, the program space for all the music and all that stuff, I think was 8K, and then the space for all the compressed voices and singing "Return to the 70s," that stuff was like 64K, and that's what we had to work with. Well, what do we have to work with now here on the Stern SAM system? Now, to try to wrap your mind around that, let's pretend that this wasn't silicon, but rather cars. Cars in 1980. Now, if car technology improved as much as memory technology, you can now buy a car in 2006 that would go 9,600 miles on a gallon. So you basically only have to fill it up once a year. So that's how radically the technology has changed, and it changes my job, because what I used to do is make all the sounds live on the pinball machine. The sounds were being created in the pinball machine, limited by whatever hardware happened to be there. Now, when you have 388 times more storage, it's a studio solution. Anything I can record, I can put in the game. And I got about 15 minutes worth of storage, and it moves everything into the studio. And if it's in the studio, that means I can iterate over it. I can keep making it better and better and use all kinds of resources. So it's an extremely different task than it was the last time I touched a pinball. The first time I ever sang in a pinball machine that actually got produced, this is a duet with Peter's son, Chris, who is voiced by Seth Green. Now, I never met Seth Green. I just ripped all of his stuff out, and then I did a mashup. But it's a duet.
Who's gonna protect me from the evil monkey in my closet? All right. In my closet. Holy crap, no! I'm Chris. Hey, a Twinkie!
So that's just not FM, right? Now open your mind, what can you do? It's studio based, and that's really great. There is a problem though relative to doing sounds for an interaction like pinball where the ball is wild, you never know what's going on. There's no synthesis. So all these things are the product of a studio, but they're all pre-rendered. They're like dead fish, you know, and the older they get, I mean, it's just, you can start them, you can stop them. That's pretty much all you can do with them. So if you want to have anything that's vaguely like adapting to the pinball play, you have to pre-render all the different variants that you would need. And on the SAM system, we were limited by space. That was 32 meg, of which I got about 26. So it's less interactive, but the assets do sound gorgeous. Okay, so my third game, I'm still, you know, trying to figure out what to do with the studio, but it's a Steve Ritchie game. And so this is my first Steve Ritchie game. And to do that, I had to fly back to Chicago because Steve didn't like what I did on Pirates of the Caribbean. Yo, yo. He just thought it was too wimpy. You know, if Steve Ritchie had made Pirates of the Caribbean, it's like, arr! You know, that's how the game would have started. And, you know, fight better. You know, it just would have been a completely different game. So I flew to Chicago only to convince Steve, hey, you're the client. I do what you want. I did what they wanted. So take it up with Dwight and Dennis. They wanted this, what you consider wimpy, and you want gnarly, I can do gnarly. So I got the gig, and I fly to Chicago, and this was the first one I did for Steve. So I gotta move this along. I got a lot more stuff, but that was challenging, and that I submitted 3 things to Steve, and he rejected all of them. And because I was like absent during the golden age of pinball, I really wasn't familiar with a lot of Steve's stuff. So then I got the pinball emulator on my system, and I loaded down some of Steve's games, and then I listened to it, and I was like, oh, that's Steve Ritchie music. And so that's pretty close. It's not what he would have done, but it worked for him. And then he was happy, and I think Spider-Man turned out okay. Then another challenge with this studio-based thing is we did Indiana Jones, and we got the London Symphony Orchestra. John Williams waving his stick in front of him, and we got the Indiana Jones March for main play. Cool. But I have like 17 more modes, and we didn't get anything but that. So now, how can I sound like John Williams? I tried. So that's a first, trying to, you know, channel John. Now, boy, was I ever wrong. This is the first time I was ever wrong. I'm doing my first John Borg project, and what was it? Whatever game it was, it's Iron Man, okay? And initially, I had seen the movie in the theater, and I didn't think the music was all that memorable. And Borg disagreed with me, and then he sent me all these YouTube videos, which are like, you know, the still picture and a track from the soundtrack. And then I had to change my mind, because he was right. Ramin Djawadi's music is so powerful that in the mix for the movie, they had to like turn it down because it would have just taken way too much attention. It's perfect pinball music. So we licensed some tracks, 3 or 4 tracks, and we sliced and diced them into the game. But then I had to channel his stuff so that I would make things for the second movie, which we didn't have any access to. So this is the piece I did for that. All right. This is, I've done this. This isn't really a first, but I want to do it with you guys because I like you. We're going to sing along in Klingon. Now, you know, the internet makes this kind of research a whole lot easier. I had this notion in my mind for the Klingon multi-ball that I wanted to have the Klingons doing that thing they do in the bar the night before the big battle where they all down in a lot of Romulan ale and then they, you know, sing their war songs. And that's what I wanted to have as the background for Klingon multi-ball. But I needed some lyrics, so... Okay, this is important. Bijech bech cho. You're going to do this. So, and technically this means if you don't surrender, but for our purposes it just means surrender, okay? So there's 4 syllables, bijech bech cho.
Bijech bech cho.
Okay, now everybody, B, bech, chech, cho. Now, to make this happen, I have a chorus. I have a piece of software that simulates like a symphony chorus. But I had to teach it how to sing Klingon. And so, just like feeding the Votrax chip for Qbert, I had to break this down into its language, which is that. And so that's what it looks like. B, jech, bech, cho. So this is what it sounds like, just the choir singing Klingon. Okay, everybody ready? Now, I understand it's a little syncopated. I don't expect perfection. You're not getting paid, so we're just going to do our best. But I want to see a hearty effort because, you know, it's almost 11 o'clock. You've been sitting around long enough. You can do this. So this is the whole thing with the music and the thing, and you just sing along. I'll try to prompt you. You're on your own.
Give yourself a hand for the amazing Klingon choir!
All right. See, it's a first time for you, too. Okay. Then another first is I deal with this guy who's got what I think is a daring vision. In 2013, I went to the show in Tacoma, and this guy doesn't bring a game. He brings a PowerPoint slide, and he's making this wacky game where he puts a video thing in the playfield and stuff. And I thought it was really a good idea. So I proposed a notion of deferred sweat equity where I would do all this work and someday maybe never get paid for it. Especially since I have a paying client here in the audience. I am going to get paid for this work. I don't work for free. Trust me. Oh, and so it's taken this guy forever, but there's one out there on the show floor in the vendor space. This is the P3 system from Multimorphic. And he did a game called Lexy Lightspeed Escape from Earth. And I did all the stuff for that. And I never lose an opportunity because if any of you played it out there on the show floor, you haven't heard it. Okay, so you're going to get to hear a few of the things. And the way I like to work with these things, especially this is an original title, is the music is there for a lot of reasons, but one of them is to establish a sense of place, what you're doing, who you're doing it with. So the first thing about Lexy is she's a space girl who crash lands her ship into the Florida Everglades because there's a government base there that shot her down. So the first thing that's important is the Everglades. that's OOM music, right? It's not the most energetic thing ever because you're just trying to qualify targets and make things happen. It just wants to establish a sense of place, give it some energy, make it pretty. The next thing is there are locals down in this space. You're in the Florida Everglades and you meet some interesting characters. And so there, you have adventures with these characters, and one of them is you go to a bar. You know, what does Lexy know from beer? I never lose an opportunity to use a banjo. Then another element in the game are the bad guys, the government agents. So you interact with them several times, and this is some music for when this is lights out multi-ball. You have to hit targets, turn off lights, and then you enable the jackpot phase. Then at the end of the game, when Lexy has retrieved all the parts and gas and everything she needs to repair her ship so she can do her escape from Earth, in her parting shot, she destroys Area 51, whatever. And so this is some music for Lexy Fights Back. And I got a new client. And this is one of my versions of one of the one tune that we licensed from the thing. And we did a post-mortem, which is...
Well, that could have been worse.
You know, it's actually, you know, it's the project that refuses to die, or even, you know, so doing a post-mortem is a bit premature, but I'm going to talk about, since I didn't do very much of the music in the game, I'm going to talk about the sound effects, which actually is what I spend 60% of my time on, because you really don't play the music. You play the sound effects. And it's really tough to express yourself in 3 seconds and come up with 200 or 300 meaningful things that are exactly the right thing, that are all different, that are either rewarding or whatever they need to be. So, The Hobbit is one of the most amazing licenses I've ever worked with. Warner Brothers was extremely liberal, and we got clear stereo recordings of the voices and clear stereo recordings of the sound effects. 7.5 hours of them. That's why the project never ends. And so what I do with that is I take that clear sound effect thing and I re-merge it with the image to help me figure out what these sounds are. And so this is an example of what I work from. So listening to it, you can imagine if you didn't put that back with the image and you're just listening to that, trying to go, and what exactly is that thing? So you got to do that. One of the most disappointing moments in my life is when The Hobbit got out there, and then I start reading on Pinside how people say, gee, there's, you know, we don't know when anything's going on. There seems to be nothing for when we score things or do things. It's just like, seriously? Stingers are what I call these things, right? And there's like 442 of them in the game. And so clearly there's some kind of disconnect. I have not done something right. If you haven't noticed, there are 442 of these things being, you know, triggered appropriately. So what do these things do? One of the important things is knowing when a mode starts, because you do a thing and then you're in some kind of new activity. So there are 32 book modes plus a bunch of other stuff, and every one of these has a unique introduction, some video and sounds that go with that. So here's an example. You missed that, huh? Okay, then when you complete a mode, that's even more important, because you can visit a mode, but when you actually complete a mode successfully, that's a big deal. You get a bunch of points for it, and you want to know you did it. So there are 32 of these. You know, that's me. Like, da-da-da, da-da-da, you know, and excuse me, you did a good job, you know, doing what I can. And then the whole notion of scoring something, because this game is just filled with stacking and all kinds of other stuff that wreak havoc with the coherent story we're trying to tell you. So scoring events are really important, and so they have to be big. Then you activate a feature, and this feature is an unusual feature because most games don't have a stand-up target on the outlane. This one does, and when you hit this during multi-balls, you add a ball. So it's like a life-saving thing, and for this, Bjorn, the shapeshifter character who can turn himself into a bear, he's the thing that represents this. So when you do that and hit this crazy target that you're not looking at down here, you get this. Okay, so then the last of my firsts is I also got yet another new client, and so I may have never met this client had The Hobbit occurred in some normal time period, but The Hobbit really did take a long time to do because it is the biggest software package that has ever been done, probably ever will be done for a pinball machine. So if you want a machine that's immensely collectible because it will be unique for 100 years, you should get The Hobbit.
Morning, Mother.
So I started working with Heighway Pinball and the Alien project, which is taken quite a while to get to the point, and I won't talk about any of the other things that are going on. But the first thing people ask, you know, when you say you're going to do an Alien Pinball is, where's Hudson?
Is this going to be a stand-up fight, sir, or another bug hunt? Hey, man, I don't want to rain on your parade. Where's some real pretty shit now, man? Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us.
Oh, man, that just beats it all.
Woo! Game over, man. It's game over.
Okay, so yeah, rest assured, there's plenty of Hudson. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to do is what I think of as an autopsy. We're going to take a piece of music, assuming this will play it, we're going to take a piece of music apart and kind of show you how it came to be. And this is the music from Ambush Multiball. If you hit the Xeno guy 5 times the first time, you start a battle mode where the Xenos attack you. And you get this great display, this scanner, which shows you where they're coming from. And that's live. That actually works. The target's on the left, you see it, and Hudson calls out their distance for the closest one. It's neat.
This is an autopsy of the piece that I wrote for Ambush Multiball for Alien Pin. This is an action scene where the Xenomorphs are attacking our Space Marines. First section sounds like this. The melody is composed of brass, primarily, augmented by some strings. The low brass is the primary instrument. Then there's a line underneath that played by trumpets. Keeps creeping up to make it a bit more tense. Then In my mind, the xenomorphs sound like strings played with a Bartok articulation. So you put that together. Then we need something creepy because this is, after all, Alien. So we go to some strange articulations in the second strings. Okay, that ought to do it. Then we need some rhythm. This is Pinball, after all. We augment that with some cymbals. And we're channeling James Horner, not infringing on his copyrights, but he really likes to use anvils hit with hammers. So let's listen to that. Okay, so then the rhythm. Get down, get back up again. So the whole thing, section A, section B is a section that goes between one part and another, and it features some nice cellos. Dissonance. Right, then there's the section C. Again, featuring those Bartok strings doing Xeno riffs. Then we do something different with the low brass in section D. Which is our Marines trying to get it together, and with the percussion, it starts getting pretty heavy. But then I believe these Xenos come back, because there's so many of them. And in the final section, we have the Marines trying to get it together, all together, going up in a figure played by the brass and the Bartok strings.
I'm done. Only 6 minutes over. I want to thank Gabe and Dave for inviting me and bringing me out here. This has been really nifty. I have never given a presentation like this east of Chicago. The last time I was in Boston was over 20 years ago, and I was a researcher. I want to thank my wife who puts up with me. I work at home and all that implies, and she's very supportive and really takes care of me. Then, I mean, the most important thing is, you know, I get paid by clients, but you guys are really what I do it for. I mean, if I don't make you happy, if I don't tickle that part of your amygdala and make things happen, then I've failed. And so I thank the pinball community, because I couldn't have this gig without you guys. It's fantastic. Then those t-shirts that were given out.
Don't give it back to him.
No, I'll give it back to you. I just want to hold it up. The only reason I do this, I promised I would do this. Last year, I wrote some music for this podcast, and it's a comic book thing. They have a program at Michigan State University, and Ryan Flavor is a professor there, and he's also a huge pinball fanatic. And I met him at Expo a couple years ago, and he's a big P3 guy too, and he did a t-shirt for them. And he commissioned me. He wanted me to write the music for his podcast, which I did. And then he had a special episode 11, which just went live on July 1st. He's a good interviewer, but like all podcasts, the one feature they lack is brevity. So there's like a 3.5-hour thing, more that you should know about me out there. And if you're curious at all, if it's piqued your interest, MSU, Michigan State University Comics Podcast. That'll get you there. Those are the Google terms. That's all you need.
Or the goggles.
Or goggle, yeah.
Did I put goggle? Oh man. Yeah, see, my wife's career.
Microsoft and you.
No. My wife's career before we moved here, early on in our marriage, she was a professional proofreader. It's hell to live with a proofreader. So I don't let her anywhere near my stuff because it's just so mind-crushingly,
Maybe you should.
all these things. Yeah, I know. Maybe I should.
Maybe you should.
Yes, pride.
Real quick, just once over.
Pride goes before a fall. I know. So I think that's it.